I had never seen the Exmoor moorlands like this before. The morning should have been calm, just a light chill lingering as I saddled my mare and rode out from the old Worthington estate. Instead, a heavy curtain of fog smothered the rolling hills, swallowing fences, bracken, and every familiar path I'd known since childhood. Rain came down hard, stinging my cheeks and soaking through my oilskin jacket. The wind howled, dragging loose strands of my hair across my face as if to blind me. All I could hear was the drum of rain on my hat and the deep, throaty gusts that made my horse's ears flick back in irritation. Exmoor had always been wild, but today it was angry, and somewhere in that white nothingness, something was wrong. I'd set out to check on the Exmoor ponies, my family's legacy and my life's work. The old stone fences were barely visible, and the moor felt endless, unfamiliar. My heart hammered in my chest, each step my mare took echoing the worry in my mind. I leaned low, urging her forward, scanning for any sign of movement through the haze. My breath fogged in the cold air, each exhale a small cloud drifting into the wet void. Suddenly I heard it, a desperate, broken sound that sliced through the storm. At first I thought I'd imagined it, just a trick of wind and nerves. But then it came again, a sharp, weak whinny that barely rose above the roar of the rain. I stopped dead, my mare stamping restlessly, nostrils flaring. I felt every muscle in my body go tense. No Exmoor foal would be alone out here, not in this weather. I dismounted, boots squelching in the soggy turf, and led my horse forward, following the sound. Every step was a battle. The ground sucked at my feet, and the rain seemed to push me back. The moor stretched in all directions, endless and gray. Then, through the veil of mist, something small moved. At first I saw only a blur, dark legs, a flash of muddy brown. I blinked, wiped the water from my eyes, and there it was, a foal. He was tiny, barely past weaning, his damp coat clinging to a narrow frame. His big, wild eyes glinted with terror and confusion, nostrils flared, sides heaving, mud caked his legs, and he trembled with every gust of wind. He looked up at me, froze, and for a second I thought he might bolt. But then he called out, one trembling, pleading whinny that broke through every barrier of reason or caution I had left. Pip. That was the name that came to me, though I'd never seen him up close before. I'd watched him play beside his mother in better weather, full of energy, always trailing behind. But now he was alone, shivering, and so heartbreakingly small. I crouched down, speaking softly, trying to sound calm despite the racing of my heart. "It's okay, little guy, I'm here," I murmured, my voice nearly swallowed by the wind. Pip took a hesitant step toward me, then looked over his shoulder, back into the fog. His entire body trembled, and for a moment I wondered if he was hurt. But then he turned, snorting, eyes wide and desperate, and began to walk away from me, back into the swirling gray. He stopped, turned his head, and let out a soft, anxious call, urging me, almost begging me to follow. My mind reeled. A foal this age wouldn't wander off unless something was terribly wrong. "Where's your mama?" I whispered, my breath catching in my throat. Lightning flashed far off across the moor, and thunder rolled, the storm's anger echoing the dread that twisted in my stomach. My horse danced anxiously at the end of the lead rope, but I couldn't turn back now. I followed Pip, stumbling after him as he darted through the wet grass. The fog grew thicker, swallowing us whole. Pip's tiny hooves splashed through puddles, his tail flicking with each startled glance over his shoulder. The landscape shifted, Open moor gave way to boggier ground, the kind that could swallow a full-grown pony. I could barely see 2 yards ahead, and every instinct told me to turn back. But I pressed on, teeth gritted, the memory of Pip's cry burning in my chest. Suddenly, Pip stopped dead. He whinnied, louder this time, desperate, almost frantic. I rushed forward, and through the gloom, I finally saw her. Rose. She lay on her side in a patch of muddy ground, her coat soaked and streaked with filth, sides heaving, her great eyes dull with exhaustion. She tried to lift her head, but only managed a weak twitch. Her legs thrashed, sinking deeper with every movement. Pip pressed himself against her, nuzzling her neck, letting out little whimpers as if willing her to move. My breath caught, tears stinging my eyes as I took in the scene. Rose, the strongest mare in the herd, was trapped and fading. For a moment, I stood frozen, fear pinning me to the spot. The rain seemed to grow even colder, the wind shriller. Then, without thinking, I dropped to my knees in the mud, reaching out to Rose, feeling her trembling muscles beneath my hands. "Hang on. I'm here," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Pip's tiny body pressed close, eyes fixed on mine, filled with a hope so raw it hurt to look at him. In that instant, every instinct screamed that this was no longer about duty or legacy. This was about survival, about family. The storm could rage all it wanted. I wasn't going to let them go. Not tonight. The cold cut through me like a knife as I knelt beside Rose in the sucking mud, the rain drumming steadily on my back. Pip's shivering body pressed against her neck, his eyes never leaving mine, full of desperate hope and a fear so deep it made my own heart clench. Rose's breathing was shallow, her flanks rising and falling in uneven, ragged waves. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment as I stroked her forehead, her lashes heavy with water and grit. I could see the effort it took for her just to move. Every instinct in me screamed urgency, but the world seemed to slow, the storm's roar muffled by the sickening dread growing inside me. I took a quick inventory, scanning for wounds, feeling gently along her leg. Mud and reeds had tangled around her hocks, binding her in a natural trap. Her belly was cold to the touch, and I could see she'd been fighting for hours, maybe longer. My mind raced. Out here with this kind of exposure, even the hardiest Exmoor could go into shock. "It's all right, Rose, just hold on," I murmured, but my own voice sounded thin and powerless. Pip let out another plaintive whinny, pawing at his mother's side as if he could wake her with sheer will. The sight broke something inside me. I looked into the mist, hoping to spot another horse, another human, anything that meant I wasn't alone. But the moor was empty except for us, the fog closing in tighter with every breath. I yanked my phone out of my pocket, hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped it. The screen flickered, wet and uncooperative, but somehow I managed to call Dr. Harrington. Each ring felt like an eternity. When he finally answered, his voice was rough with static and worry. "Edward, it's Rose. She's trapped near the southern bog, just past the old stone wall. I don't know how long she's been here. She's freezing, barely conscious. Please, I need you now." His voice cut through the line, steady and calm despite the tension. "Stay with her, Amelia. I'll call the park rangers and get the rescue team. Can you keep her warm?" I swallowed hard, wiping rain from my eyes. "I'll try. But she's so cold, Edward. She's fading. I'm on my way. Don't let her slip away. Keep talking to her. I'll be there as soon as I can." The line went dead. I tucked the phone away, my mind racing with fear and adrenaline. I took off my jacket, ignoring the cold that bit instantly into my arms, and draped it over Rose's neck and shoulders. My mare stood nearby, blowing anxiously, but I didn't have time to worry about her. Every movement felt frantic but futile. Pip pressed in closer, trembling so hard his legs threatened to buckle. I took the emergency blanket from my saddlebag and wrapped it around his back, murmuring nonsense, anything to keep him calm. I tried to block the wind with my own body, huddling low, arms spread wide to shelter the little foal as best I could. The rain intensified, soaking me to the bone. I could barely feel my fingers. I glanced at Rose again. Her ears flickered at my voice, and for a second, her eyes found mine, glassy and unfocused. She let out a soft, guttural sound, a plea or a farewell. I couldn't tell which. I blinked hard, willing myself not to cry. Not here. Not now. Pip nudged his mother's muzzle, letting out a series of soft, broken calls. He pawed at her, desperation rising. With every sound, I felt his grief as if it were my own. I couldn't let him lose her. Not after all they'd survived together on these moors. Not to a storm or a patch of treacherous ground. A memory flashed in my mind. Rose leading her herd through the tall summer grasses, Pip trotting awkwardly behind, still so new to the world, stumbling but always getting up. She'd always protected him, taught him to run, to hide, to trust. Now he was trying to return the favor, as helpless as any child. I forced myself to think. I'd been trained for emergencies, but nothing ever prepares you for the real thing. I checked Rose's breathing again, shallow but still there. I rubbed her neck, talking to her constantly, repeating her name, telling her she was brave, she was strong, that help was coming. Pip's body pressed against mine, drawing what little warmth he could. Minutes dragged by. The storm seemed to laugh at my efforts, sending gusts of wind that whipped the blanket from my shoulders, driving rain in sheets. I fought to hold it in place, my knuckles white, teeth chattering. Still, I kept my voice steady, as much for Pip as for myself. I thought I saw movement in the distance, a shadow, the flicker of a figure. But it was just the fog shifting, playing tricks on my exhausted mind. I was alone out here, the weight of responsibility crushing me. The knowledge that if Rose slipped away, Pip might never recover, and I might lose the herd's best mare, the foundation of our conservation efforts, settled over me like another wet blanket. Time was running out. Pip cried out again, louder this time, almost a scream. Rose's ear twitched, her nostrils flared. It was enough. She was still fighting. I leaned in close, whispering, pleading, begging her not to give up. "Stay with us, Rose. Please don't leave him. Don't leave me." In that moment, something shifted inside me. The fear became resolve. I would not let this story end here, on a lonely moor in the middle of a storm. I would fight for Rose, for Pip, for the herd, for everything I loved about Exmoor, no matter what it cost me. And then, as if summoned by our combined will, I heard a distant sound. A vehicle, headlights cutting through the fog, hope breaking through the despair. Help was coming, but Rose's battle was just beginning, and so was mine. The wail of the wind outside the headlights felt almost like a warning, but to me it sounded like hope clawing its way through the storm. Dr. Harrington's battered Land Rover lurched to a stop just beyond the sagging fence post. I recognized his shape immediately, hunched in a rain-spattered slicker, moving fast despite the mud threatening to swallow his boots. 2 rangers followed him, faces shadowed by hoods, their eyes wary as they surveyed the scene. Even the storm seemed to pause for a moment, as if holding its breath to see what we would do next. I barely registered my own shivers as I stood and waved them over. "She's over here!" I shouted, my voice cracking. Pip pressed against my legs, every muscle taut with nervous energy. My mare stomped and tossed her head, snorting at the sudden commotion, but I barely had time to soothe her. Dr. Harrington knelt at Rose's side, his gloved hands gentle and sure as he checked her pulse, ran fingers along her legs, pressed an ear to her chest. The two rangers unrolled tarps, laying them over the mud to keep us from sinking deeper, their movements swift and practiced. Edward's face was grim as he glanced up. "She's hypothermic. Breathing's weak, pulse is faint. We need to get her warm and dry now." "We have a thermal blanket and a stretcher in the truck," one of the rangers said. "But we'll have to move quick. Ground's getting worse by the minute." Lightning cracked, illuminating Rose's eyes, still open, but fading. Pip whimpered, nudging her with his nose, and for a heartbeat I thought he might collapse with exhaustion and fear. I stroked his neck, whispering, "You're so brave, Pip. Just a little longer." Dr. Harrington handed me his flashlight. "Keep her calm, Amelia. She needs to hear your voice." I crouched beside Rose, smoothing her mane, murmuring steady, familiar words. Stories from foalhood, promises I wasn't sure I could keep, anything to anchor her to this world. The rangers returned with the stretcher, awkward in the sucking mud. I helped them slide it underneath her, wincing as Rose's body shuddered with each movement. Pip began to pace in tight, frantic circles, almost as if he might bolt into the storm, but he kept coming back, pressing his damp side against me, seeking warmth, seeking hope. "Ready?" Edward said, voice low. I nodded, and together we lifted Rose onto the stretcher. Every muscle in my arms burned with the effort, mud sucking at our boots, the stretcher nearly slipping from our hands. For a second I feared we would drop her and end everything right there, but the rangers steadied the load and we trudged through the mire, feet sliding on wet grass and hidden roots. My breath came in ragged gasps, lungs burning, but I wouldn't let go. The Land Rover's back door was open, a blast of blessedly warm air spilling out. The rangers maneuvered Rose up the ramp, laying her gently onto a thick pad layered with blankets and straw. Dr. Harrington began rubbing her legs with towels, cursing under his breath at the cold that seemed to radiate from her bones. I scrambled in after them, hauling Pip into the cramped space. He collapsed beside his mother, his eyes fixed on her face, his breathing shallow and fast. Edward pulled a silver emergency blanket from his kit and wrapped it around Rose's chest, tucking it beneath her neck. "We need to get her temperature up, but slowly. Too fast, and she'll go into shock." I nodded, swallowing my fear. "What can I do?" She keep talking to her. Keep Pip close. She'll fight if she knows she's needed. The rangers slammed the doors shut, sealing us in a cocoon of warmth and tension. The engine rumbled to life, the old truck jerking forward, wheels spinning in the slick grass before finally catching and rolling toward the safety of the main road. Rain hammered the windows, and every bump sent a jolt of panic through my heart. I pressed my forehead to Rose's, murmuring stories about sunny mornings and the taste of spring grass. I told her about the foals she would raise, about the herd waiting for her return, about how Pip needed her, how I needed her. Dr. Harrington checked her vitals again, his brow furrowed, lips pressed tight. "Come on, old girl," he muttered, almost to himself. "Don't you leave us now." Pip let out a soft nicker, nosing at Rose's mane, his body trembling. I pulled him closer, feeling his heartbeat hammer against my palm. My own fear threatened to boil over, but I pushed it down, letting my determination rise in its place. There was no space for doubt here, not when so much hung in the balance. The drive felt endless, the world outside reduced to a blur of gray and green. I barely noticed the deep ruts or the scraping branches as we jostled along the winding lanes. All I could see was Rose's side, rising and falling with agonizing slowness, and Pip's wide, pleading eyes. Edward glanced at me. "We're almost to the barn. We'll set up heaters, IV fluids, whatever it takes. You did the right thing, Amelia. Most people wouldn't have even found them in this weather." His words gave me a flicker of hope, but I couldn't let my guard down. Not yet. Not until Rose was standing again, strong and proud beside her son. As we pulled into the courtyard, the lights of home blazing through the storm, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Help was here, but so was the real fight. Pip whinnied louder this time, his cry full of urgency and hope. I met his gaze, squeezing his shoulder gently. "We're not giving up," I promised, voice low but fierce. "Not now. Not ever." Outside, the rain battered the world into submission. But inside that rattling Land Rover, hope flickered, fragile, stubborn, and absolutely alive. We barely made it to the barn before the next squall rolled in, slamming sheets of rain against the metal roof and rattling the old doors on their hinges. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of straw and the sharp tang of antiseptic. I watched as Dr. Harrington and the Rangers moved with quiet urgency, setting up heaters, positioning Rose on thick bedding, unrolling more blankets. Pip stuck to her side, refusing food or water, his big eyes trained on every twitch of her ears. I was still peeling off my soaked gloves when the barn door creaked open again. This time, it wasn't the wind. It was the cold, clipped voice of Lord Reginald Blackwood, slicing through the noise like the crack of a whip. "Amelia Worthington, I trust you know this isn't the best time for distractions." He didn't even wipe his boots before stepping inside. He wore a dark wool coat, the collar turned up, and a black umbrella hung over his arm. His hair was slicked back, not a strand out of place, even in this storm. Behind him trailed his assistant, clipboard in hand, eyes darting from Rose to Pip to the barn's battered beams. Blackwood's gaze swept the scene with thinly veiled disdain. I bristled. My hands still trembled from adrenaline and cold, but I managed to keep my voice steady. "I'm a little busy saving a life, Lord Blackwood. This isn't a good time." He stepped closer, dropping his umbrella and letting it clatter to the floor. "We all have our priorities, Miss Worthington. Some of us are trying to bring prosperity to Exmoor. Some of us are still playing at being country heroes." He looked down at Rose, one eyebrow arching. "I heard there was some incident with your precious ponies. How unfortunate, but we do have business to discuss." His words felt like a slap, all the more so because he delivered them so calmly, as if Rose and Pip were just background noise. I felt heat rush to my cheeks. Dr. Harrington caught my eye, his frown deepening, but he wisely held his tongue. Blackwood's assistant cleared her throat, clearly eager to get on with it. "Lord Blackwood would like to know when you'll be ready to finalize the sale. He has an urgent offer, much higher than the last, if you're concerned about the future of this property." I clenched my jaw. The offer. Always the offer. My family's land, generations of it, at stake because of one man's ambition. As I said before, this is not a negotiation. We're not selling. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. He stepped so close I could smell his aftershave, sharp and expensive. You may find you have little choice soon. Your herd is dwindling, your resources are stretched thin, and— He cast a pointed look at Rose, lying motionless but breathing. Well, accidents do happen, don't they? I'd hate for sentimentality to cloud your judgment. The words hung in the air, thick with threat. I felt my fists curl tight, but I wouldn't let him see fear, not now. My judgment is clear, thank you. If you're finished, I have work to do. His assistant scribbled a note. We'll be back, Miss Worthington. Don't take too long. Blackwood lingered, his gaze moving from me to Pip, who whinnied softly, pressing against his mother. The storm howled outside, but for a moment the barn was silent except for the low whir of heaters and the uneven breathing of a sick mare. Then, just as suddenly as he'd appeared, Blackwood turned and strode out, his coat billowing behind him, his assistant scrambling to keep up. The barn door slammed shut, the wind rattling it in their wake. I let out a breath I'd been holding. Dr. Harrington moved to my side, his voice low. He won't stop, Amelia. You know that. I nodded, fighting the ache in my chest. He can threaten all he wants. I'm not giving up this land. Not for him. Not for anyone. He gave me a tired smile. Let's focus on Rose. She needs you right now. I turned back to my mare. Pip nudged me with his nose, still trembling. I ran my hand down his neck, letting him feel my steadiness. Outside, thunder rumbled again, but the barn's warmth wrapped around us, a thin barrier against the darkness. I checked Rose's breathing, counting each rise and fall of her chest. Dr. Harrington adjusted the IV, glancing at his watch. We'll have to watch her through the night. It'll be touch and go. She needs rest, warmth, and hope. A new urgency settled in me. I sat down beside Rose, Pip curling up between us, and started talking. I told stories of foalhood mischief, summer races along the stone walls, the gentle hush of the moor at dawn. My words became a shield, a way to keep the fear and the threat of Lord Blackwood at bay. The hours slipped past. The storm pounded on, but the barn was a haven of steady warmth and flickering lamplight. I watched Rose, willing her to fight. Every time her eyes fluttered open, I smiled and squeezed her neck. Pip's head drooped with exhaustion, but he refused to leave his mother's side. I thought of Blackwood's words, of the constant pressure, the threats and the cold certainty in his gaze. But here, in the circle of light, I found a different kind of strength, a stubbornness as ancient as the land itself. The Worthingtons had fought for this place for generations. I would fight for it now, for Rose, for Pip, for every wild thing that called these moors home. The night stretched ahead, long and uncertain, but I would stay with them, every moment, every heartbeat, refusing to give an inch. Let Blackwood threaten. Let the storm rage. I was ready. The night pressed on, thick and restless, each minute stretching out like a challenge. I could barely tell when the storm eased and when it roared back. Inside the barn, every sound blurred into a background thrum of anxiety and quiet desperation. I stayed close to Rose, stroking her damp forehead, whispering stories about the hills and the wildflowers and the taste of sweet grass. Pip lay against her, his eyes half shut, but his ears perked up every time her breathing changed, every time I shifted in the straw. Dr. Harrington worked quietly at Rose's side, adjusting the IV, checking her pulse and temperature, sometimes stepping out into the hallway to call the rescue team and give updates. The rangers helped where they could, bringing fresh water, clearing space around the stall, and setting up another lamp so we could watch Rose's every movement. Their faces were drawn, tired, but determined, and I could tell they understood how much this mare meant to us. To me, to Pip, and to the herd waiting out in the night. I lost track of time, my mind drifting between fear and hope, dread and stubborn resolve. The worst moments came in the silences, when Rose's breath slowed, when her eyelids fluttered, when Pip would let out a broken little whinny that seemed to echo across the empty fields beyond the barn. I kept telling myself that dawn would come, that the worst of the night would pass, but doubt gnawed at me, cold and relentless. Suddenly, just as the storm eased for a precious moment, we heard a rumble outside, a heavy engine grinding through the mud. Dr. Harrington straightened, hope flickering across his face for the first time all night. "That's them, the rescue team," he said, and I felt something lift inside me. Fragile but real. A minute later, the barn doors swung open. 3 men in bright rain jackets stepped in, carrying equipment and speaking in calm, confident voices. They moved quickly, sizing up Rose's condition, spreading out their gear, laying out more blankets, and checking the heaters. The team leader, a broad-shouldered woman with wind-reddened cheeks, knelt beside me and smiled. "Amelia Worthington, we're going to do everything we can." I nodded, my throat too tight for words. Pip stared at them, wide-eyed, and pressed closer to Rose, his whole body quivering. I rubbed his back, murmuring, "It's all right, Pip. These people are here to help. You did so good. You brought us here." The rescue team wasted no time. They checked Rose's vitals, coordinated quietly with Dr. Harrington, and set up portable heat lamps around the stall, creating a bubble of gentle warmth. They brought in a lightweight stretcher, carefully designed for horses, and together with the rangers, slid it underneath Rose's trembling body. Every movement was careful, measured, with someone always whispering to Rose or to Pip, keeping their voices low and kind. The leader gave me a reassuring nod. "We're going to lift her, just a little. Keep talking to her, Amelia. You're her anchor right now." My voice shook, but I kept going, telling Rose about the sun rising on Exmoor, about the herd waiting for her, about Pip's courage in the storm. The team coordinated their movements, counting to 3, and then lifted. For a terrifying second, Rose's legs thrashed, but the team steadied her, laying her gently on the stretcher, supporting her head and neck. Pip followed every move, refusing to be separated, even when a ranger tried to lead him back. He nickered urgently, so I let him stay close, one hand on his withers. I could feel his fear, his confusion, but also his stubbornness, the same stubbornness that had carried him through the storm to find me. The team wheeled Rose out of the stall, through the barn, and into the waiting rescue trailer just outside. I kept talking, kept reassuring both Rose and Pip, my words tumbling out in a stream of hope and promise. "You're going to be okay, Rose. They're going to take care of you. Pip's right here. We're not leaving you." The trailer was warm, lined with straw and blankets, a portable heater humming softly in the corner. Dr. Harrington rode with Rose, monitoring her breathing and temperature. The rangers took turns comforting Pip, letting him nuzzle his mother, keeping him calm. As the trailer doors closed, I felt my knees go weak with relief. We'd done it. We'd gotten her out. For the first time all night, I allowed myself to hope, really hope, that Rose might survive. The rescue convoy pulled away from the barn, headlights cutting through the rain, taillights disappearing into the mist. I stood in the yard, shivering, watching them go, Pip's soft whinny still echoing in my ears. I realized how exhausted I was, how empty the world felt without Rose's strong presence beside me. But then I remembered Pip's courage, the way he'd braved the storm for his mother, the way he'd refused to let her go. If he could fight, so could I. Back in the barn, I started cleaning up, sweeping the straw, folding blankets, clearing a space for Rose's hopeful return. The storm outside faded into a steady, gentle rain. My heart beat a little steadier. For the first time, the night felt like it might finally break, giving way to the dawn. Rose wasn't out of danger yet, but hope was alive, flickering stubbornly against the darkness. And as long as she and Pip needed me, I would never stop fighting. The rescue team's trailer rocked gently as it made its way down the winding lane toward our veterinary barn, headlights sweeping across the stone walls and glistening puddles. I rode with Pip in the chase vehicle, pressed close to the window, watching the faint shadow of Rose through the frosted glass. Each time the trailer hit a rut or pitched around a sharp turn, my stomach twisted with dread. I kept murmuring to Pip, soothing him as he pressed his small, trembling body into my lap. Even with the heater blowing, the chill of worry never left my bones. Dr. Harrington rode with Rose in the trailer, his silhouette hunched, one hand steady on her neck, monitoring her breathing, whispering encouragements and instructions to the rescue techs. We all held on to hope, tentative, brittle, but real. For the first time, it felt like we might actually get her through the night. I looked out at the moor, still blanketed in mist, and pictured the sunrise lighting up the fields, Rose grazing in the soft gold light, Pip at her side. I forced myself to believe in that vision. We pulled into the vet barn just as a cold wind swept in, rattling the rain gutters. The team sprang into action, lowering the ramp and wheeling Rose out on the special stretcher. She barely moved, her sides rising and falling so faintly that my heart skipped a beat each time. Pip scrambled beside her, refusing to be led away even as we navigated through the narrow corridor into the heated stall prepared for emergencies. Dr. Harrington met my eyes, and his look was serious, tinged with worry, but he nodded for me to stay close. Inside, the air was warm and dry, lamps casting a gentle light over fresh bedding, IV bags hanging from makeshift stands, medical supplies lined up with military precision. Rose's body shuddered as we settled her onto the straw, blankets tucked around her, heaters humming softly. For a few tense minutes, the only sound was the rasp of her breath and Pip's soft, nervous whinnies. Dr. Harrington checked her temperature and frowned. She's still cold, but she's stabilized a bit. Now we need to move slowly. I sat next to her head, stroking her forelock, murmuring stories about the moor in spring and the smell of wild thyme on the wind. Pip curled up tight against her chest, never leaving her side. For a brief moment, it almost felt safe, like we were cocooned from the world outside. Nothing could touch us. Then, suddenly, Rose's body jerked. Her breathing, steady for the last half hour, quickened. Sharp, shallow gasps, her nostrils flaring wildly. Dr. Harrington's head snapped up, his hands moving quickly. He listened to her heart, checked the IV, his voice suddenly tight. She's going into shock. Too much, too fast. The world shrank to the flickering light of the stall, the desperate struggle for every breath. Pip pressed closer, letting out high, panicked cries. My heart pounded in my ears as Dr. Harrington called for help. The rescue techs leaped into motion, grabbing warming packs, adjusting the IV fluids, rolling Rose gently onto her side to relieve pressure on her lungs. My mind raced with panic. I watched as Rose's eyes rolled back, her legs twitching. Pip let out a piercing cry that echoed off the barn walls. I wrapped my arms around him, trying to steady him and myself. "Hold on, Rose. Stay with us." Dr. Harrington barked instructions, his calm demeanor cracking as he pushed a syringe into the IV line. It's a sudden drop. Her body's fighting too hard to adjust to the warmth. Amelia, keep talking to her. She needs to know she's not alone. I leaned in, fighting tears, my voice shaking as I told Rose about the first day she galloped across the moor, about the soft grass under her hooves, about how Pip needed her more than anything. My words blurred together, desperate and pleading. Pip nuzzled his mother's cheek, nudging her, refusing to let her drift away. Time slowed to a crawl. Every second felt like a battle, Rose's chest heaving, the techs rushing to adjust medication, Dr. Harrington swearing under his breath as he checked her heart rate again and again. "Come on, Rose. Come on." For one horrifying moment, everything went still. Rose's breath paused, her body stiffened. I held Pip, burying my face in his neck, unable to breathe, willing her to come back. I heard Dr. Harrington's voice, a single word, sharp and urgent, then a rush of movement as he injected a stimulant directly into her vein. A long second passed. Then Rose shuddered, her lungs filling with air, her body twitching as she struggled to come back to us. Dr. Harrington let out a shaky sigh. "That's it, girl. Come on, stay with us." I sobbed, relief and fear mingling in my chest. Pip whinnied, a broken sound that turned slowly, miraculously, into something softer. A plea answered. I kissed Rose's forehead, feeling the heat rising at last beneath her damp coat. "Don't leave us. Not now. You're almost there." For the next hour, we hovered in that fragile space between hope and despair. Rose's breathing steadied, then faltered, then steadied again. The rescue techs watched every sign, adjusting the heaters and checking her pulse, never giving up, no matter how bleak it looked. I didn't dare move, afraid that if I stopped talking, if Pip stopped nuzzling, we might lose her for good. I felt time blur, the outside world fading to a distant memory. All that mattered was this stall, these lives, this desperate battle to hold on. As dawn hinted at the edges of the sky, painting the mist a faint silver, I realized I had never felt so helpless or so fiercely determined. We had come too far. I would not let her go. The world outside the vet barn remained lost in a ghostly fog, rainwater still dripping from the eaves, but inside, every second was a crisis. We hovered in a tense circle around Rose, waiting for any sign of progress, any hint that her struggle might ease. Dr. Harrington barely moved from her side, his hands steady but his jaw tight, eyes locked on every twitch of her body. The rescue techs worked quietly, methodically, checking equipment, swapping out IV bags, whispering to one another as if afraid to disturb the thin thread holding Rose to life. I knelt at her head, feeling the straw dig into my knees, Pip curled into my lap, trembling with exhaustion. The heat lamps cast golden pools of light, but nothing seemed to chase away the chill that had settled deep in my bones. The only thing that felt real was the sound of Rose's shallow breaths, each one harder than the last, and the desperate faith in Pip's eyes as he pressed close to his mother's side. Suddenly, Rose gave a violent shudder, her legs twitching. Her breathing faltered, turning to short, gasping pants. Dr. Harrington leaned in, checking her gums, then shot a look at one of the techs. Her blood pressure's dropping again. She's not responding to the fluids. The words landed like blows. Each syllable chipped away at my resolve, threatened to send me spiraling into panic. I forced myself to stay present, to keep my voice steady as I stroked Rose's neck. "Stay with us, girl. Please, you can do this." The rescue team scrambled into action. One tech began massaging Rose's limbs, working hard to keep circulation moving. Another prepped an emergency injection, hands moving quickly but carefully. Dr. Harrington turned to me, his face grave but hopeful. "This is the turning point, Amelia. If she's going to make it, it's now. I need you and Pip to keep her anchored. Don't stop talking. Don't let her drift." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Pip nuzzled Rose's cheek, his tiny voice trembling with a weak nicker. I leaned in close, whispering about the summer grass, about the foals that needed her, about the home waiting for her. The words poured out in a desperate rush, fueled by love and fear, every memory I could conjure layered with hope. Remember running through the moor in the morning dew. Remember teaching Pip to jump the stream. You're the heart of the herd, Rose. Don't give up. Pip needs you. I need you. Dr. Harrington injected the stimulant, pressing his fingers to Rose's pulse, willing her to respond. For a moment, there was nothing, just a stillness that felt like the edge of the world. Then, slowly, Rose's eyelids fluttered. Her chest rose, shaky and slow, but it rose. Pip nickered again, his voice steadier, louder, almost defiant. I clung to him, the tears running unchecked down my face. "That's it, girl. Come back to us." But the battle was far from over. Rose's breathing was ragged, her legs trembling violently. The rescue tech massaged harder, working warmth and life back into her body. Dr. Harrington started an oxygen mask, adjusting the straps with practiced care. "She's still in danger. Amelia, keep going." My voice shook, but I refused to let fear win. "You're not alone, Rose. We're all here. Remember when you broke through the old fence and led the herd down to the stream? You never gave up then. Don't give up now." The techs moved in harmony, wrapping Rose's legs in warm towels, repositioning her to ease her breathing. The barn's quiet filled with the sounds of life. My voice, Pip's soft whinnies, the low hum of heaters, the rustle of straw. Minutes stretched like hours, each one a battle waged on the edge of hope and despair. Outside, the storm had eased to a gentle drizzle, dawn painting the fog a pale, ghostly silver. Inside, Rose's fight continued. There were moments when I thought we were losing her, when her breathing faltered, when her heart raced dangerously. Each time, Pip and I called her back, refusing to let her slip away. "Rose, you're stronger than this. You're everything to us. Please, just one more breath." Dr. Harrington's hands never left her side. He checked her pulse, adjusted her oxygen, murmured encouragement in the soft, tired voice of a man who had seen too many close calls. "She's stabilizing. Just a little longer. Don't let her go, Amelia." So I held on. Pip held on. Rose's breathing slowly found a rhythm, uneven but steady. I lost track of time, lost myself in the small, stubborn acts of hope. I told Rose about all the things we still had to do. The new foals in spring, the wildflowers blooming on the hills, the feel of the wind on the high moor. I told her she was the soul of the land, the reason I fought so hard to protect it. The sky outside began to brighten. In that dim, fragile light, Rose lifted her head, just an inch, but enough to meet Pip's eyes. He let out a joyful, trembling cry. I laughed through my tears, unable to believe what I was seeing. Dr. Harrington nodded, a relieved smile breaking through his exhaustion. "She's fighting. She's not giving up." For the first time, real hope bloomed in my chest. Rose was still with us, still fighting, still holding on. Pip pressed his nose to her cheek, and I wrapped my arms around both of them, the three of us bound together in the strange, fierce love that only comes from surviving the darkest night. The battle wasn't over, but the worst had passed. We'd stood on the brink and refused to let go. And as the first rays of sun pierced the mist, I realized we'd done something more than save a life. We'd reignited the spirit that kept this land, and all its wild creatures, alive. Sunlight finally began to seep through the cracks in the old barn roof, painting the straw in patches of gold. The storm was nothing but a memory now. The only sounds left were the low hum of the heater and the quiet, hopeful breathing of the small team that had fought so hard through the night. My eyes ached from exhaustion and the blur of tears that wouldn't stop coming, but I couldn't look away from Rose. She was still lying on her side, but something in the air had shifted, a subtle but unmistakable lightness, as if the barn itself was holding its breath and daring to hope. Pip, who had refused to rest for so many hours, finally relaxed against his mother. His eyelids fluttered, but he kept watch, nuzzling her neck, breathing with her. I reached over and stroked his mane, feeling the softness under my palm, the quiet strength in his tiny frame. He had led us through the storm, and he had not given up. Neither would I. Dr. Harrington checked Rose's vitals one more time, his hands steady but eyes shining with relief. Her heart rate strong and her temperature's coming up nicely, he said, letting out a long sigh. I think we're over the worst. She's a fighter, that one. I wanted to believe him, but fear still gnawed at my insides. She'll walk again, right? She'll be back with the herd? My voice was hoarse, rough from too many hours whispering, pleading, praying. I wasn't even sure if I was asking for Rose or for myself. Dr. Harrington gave me a gentle, tired smile. If I've learned anything out here, it's to never underestimate the Worthington mares or their stubbornness. With rest and care, she'll be back on her feet. He glanced at Pip, who nickered softly as if he understood, especially with him by her side. The rescue techs began to pack up their supplies, voices low, moving with a quiet satisfaction that only comes after a battle well fought. I watched them go, feeling a wave of gratitude I could hardly put into words. Each of them had given something tonight: time, energy, a piece of their heart. And now they left us alone with the soft glow of a new morning. As the barn settled into peace, I found myself drifting in and out of sleep beside Rose, my head resting against her warm shoulder, Pip curled in the crook of my arm. I dreamed of summer fields, of laughter echoing across the moor, of Rose leading the herd with Pip at her side. When I woke, the barn was filled with the gentle hush of dawn. Rose's breathing was slow and steady, and when I reached out, her ear flicked in response. The tiniest sign of life, but enough to bring a fresh surge of hope. I called softly to her, telling her the storm was gone, that she was safe, that her family was waiting for her outside. Pip lifted his head and whinnied, bright and clear, a sound that seemed to bounce off the barn walls and fill the space with possibility. Rose opened her eyes, and for a moment, she looked right at me. There was exhaustion, yes, but there was something else. Recognition, gratitude, a spark of the wild, indomitable spirit that had always set her apart. Dr. Harrington brought a bucket of warm mash and held it out. I coaxed Rose gently, watching as she sniffed, then slowly, tentatively, took a bite. Tears sprang to my eyes again, but this time they were tears of joy. That's it, Rose. You're home. The sun climbed higher, cutting through the last of the mist outside, lighting up the old barn like a cathedral. Pip pranced in the straw, kicking up his heels, his energy returning with every minute. I let him roam a little, confident that he wouldn't stray far. He came back to Rose, nudged her affectionately, then circled the stall as if telling the world that his mother had made it, that the nightmare was over. For a while, we just sat together in the peace that followed the storm. I thought about everything that had brought us to this moment, the stubbornness, the love, the fierce will to survive. I thought about the generations of Worthingtons who had poured their lives into this land, and about the uncertain future we still faced. But now, with Rose's breath steady in the morning air, nothing felt impossible. Outside, the world began to wake. I could hear the rest of the herd moving in the lower fields, quickering softly, as if they could sense that their leader was safe. I heard birdsong for the first time in days, a sweet, hopeful chorus that carried through the open barn door. Dr. Harrington packed his bag, pausing by my side. "You saved her, Amelia. Don't ever doubt that. You and Pip." His voice was gentle, but the weight of his words settled on me like a benediction. I watched Rose for another long moment, then stood, my legs stiff and sore from hours on the straw. I looked around at the quiet barn, at the soft sunlight streaming in, at the little family we had fought so hard to keep together. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe in miracles. The worst was behind us, but I knew challenges remained. There was still Blackwood and his endless threats, still the fragile balance of the herd and the land, still the endless work of protecting everything we loved. But as Rose lifted her head and Pip danced around her, I felt a fierce pride take root inside me. We had survived. We had done the impossible. I leaned over and pressed my forehead to Rose's, breathing in the scent of her mane, the warmth of her skin, the quiet strength that had carried us through the storm. "Welcome home, old girl," I whispered. "We're not done yet." The day had only just begun, but already it felt brighter than any I could remember. The light over Exmoor that morning was unlike anything I'd seen in weeks, soft, clear, as if the world itself had been washed clean by the storm. The worst of the night was over, but the truth lingered in my bones, both as exhaustion and as a strange new strength. Rose dozed peacefully on her bed of straw. Pip curled up against her, his breathing matched to hers. The barn was quiet except for the low hum of a heater and the occasional rustle of hay as one of them shifted. I could have stayed like that forever, content to just exist with them in that fragile peace. But the world outside was already moving. I heard my mare whinny in the paddock and the distant clang of buckets as the rangers tended the other horses. Dr. Harrington had left for a quick nap but promised to return by noon. I stepped out into the yard, the air crisp and full of the smell of wet earth and new beginnings, and let myself breathe. Really breathe, for the first time in days. I leaned against the fence and looked out at the land. Acres of rolling green, dotted with the shapes of grazing ponies, the old stone walls threading their way across the moor. This was my family's legacy, the place generations of Worthingtons had fought to keep wild and whole. But after last night, it felt even bigger than that. It was Rose's home, Pip's home, mine. Every hoofprint and blade of grass felt suddenly sacred. I turned the events over in my mind, searching for meaning. All my life I'd thought of myself as the protector, the one standing between the herd and the threats outside. Storms, poachers, even men like Lord Blackwood with their money and ambition. But it took Pip, a shivering, half-wild foal braving the worst night of his life for his mother. to remind me what real courage was. It wasn't about being strong all the time. It was about not giving up, about pushing through fear for someone you love, about believing in miracles when there's nothing left to believe in. Pip could have run, could have hidden or given in to panic, but instead he found me in the storm. He wouldn't let me stop fighting, not for a moment. Watching him now, so small beside his mother, I realized the lesson was bigger than survival. It was about loyalty, sacrifice, and faith, not just in others, but in yourself. I went back inside the barn, taking a seat beside Rose and Pip. They woke at my touch. Rose's eyes were clearer now, her breathing steady, her strength returning minute by minute. Pip stood and stretched, then nuzzled my hand, as if reminding me I was part of the family too. For a while I sat there, stroking their manes, thinking about all we had to lose, and for the first time, I didn't feel helpless. I felt ready. The sound of an engine broke the silence, a car crunching up the drive. I tensed, a jolt of irritation and dread in my gut. But this time it wasn't the rescue team or the Rangers. It was Lord Blackwood. He stepped out in his immaculate coat, his assistant trailing behind, eyes sharp and assessing. He didn't bother with greetings. "I hope you had a productive night, Miss Worthington," he said, glancing pointedly at Rose. "I see your sentimental attachment to these animals is as strong as ever." I met his gaze, letting the exhaustion and anger and pride settle in my voice. "Stronger than ever, actually. And before you ask, no, I'm not selling. Not now, not ever." He sneered, but I didn't flinch. Something in me had changed. The fear was still there, but it was tempered by everything Pip and Rose had taught me. He tried to argue, his assistant flipping through pages of numbers and projections, but their words bounced off me like rain off stone. I saw Blackwood for what he was, a man who had never fought for anything but profit, who didn't understand what it meant to love, to protect, to sacrifice. "If you're finished, I have a family to tend to," I said, turning my back on him and kneeling by Rose. He hesitated, then turned and left, the slam of his car door echoing across the fields. For a long moment I just breathed, letting the power of that simple act fill me up. I didn't know what the future would bring. Maybe Blackwood would try again, with lawyers and threats and money. Maybe storms would come, or disease, or new challenges I couldn't imagine. But now I understood. I wasn't alone. Rose, Pip, the whole herd, they were with me. My family was bigger and braver than I'd ever realized. As the morning turned to afternoon, I gathered the Rangers and Dr. Harrington in the kitchen for strong tea and a quiet celebration. We talked about the night, laughed about my wild dash through the storm with Pip, shared stories of rescues gone right and wrong. I realized that, like Rose and Pip, I was surrounded by people who believed in something bigger than themselves. People who would stand with me no matter how hard the fight got. Later, as the sun dipped behind the hills, I walked out to the field with Pip trotting at my heels. Rose followed, slow but steady, her eyes bright. The herd greeted her with curious nickers, forming a loose, gentle circle around their leader. Pip danced with joy, running from one mare to another, the happiest, bravest little colt in the world. I watched them, watched the way Rose stood tall again, the way the herd accepted her back, the way the land itself seemed to breathe easier with her home. My heart ached with pride and love, but also with a new kind of determination. I understood, now more than ever, what it meant to belong to this place, to these animals. Love, real love, wasn't just about protecting what you have. It was about risking everything, about showing up when it's hardest, about never letting go. Pip had taught me that. Rose had proved it. And now it was my turn to carry that lesson forward. No matter what came next, I was ready. Not just to fight, but to lead, to protect, to believe, to hope. Because in the heart of Exmoor, surrounded by family, miracles didn't feel impossible. They felt inevitable. Days blurred into weeks, but that morning, the one where Rose took her first trembling steps back into the pasture, sunlight crowning her dark mane, became the pivot point of my life. The crisis had passed, but nothing was quite the same. The herd moved differently now, tighter and somehow more attentive, as if they too remembered that razor-thin space between loss and survival. Pip was never far from Rose, still full of restless energy, but his loyalty seemed to have deepened, anchoring him to his mother with a fierce new bond. I settled into a new routine, one shaped by gratitude and resolve. Each morning I made a quiet circuit of the fields, pausing by the old stone walls where wildflowers now pushed through cracks left by the storm. The air had a clarity I'd never noticed before. The songs of skylarks, the distant bark of a fox, the slow, sure breath of the land healing after a battering night. There was work to be done, always, but now it felt purposeful, not just reactive. The disaster had given me back a sense of agency. Instead of bracing for the next threat, I was preparing for the future. The support that poured in from neighbors and friends astounded me. Letters and emails arrived from people I hadn't spoken to in years, some sharing memories of my parents and the early days of the Exmoor conservation effort, others sending photos of their own ponies or simply wishing Rose a swift recovery. Kids from the local school wrote handmade cards for Pip, their drawings taped up in the tack room, a gallery of hope born from one colt's courage. And yet, the shadow of Lord Blackwood never quite faded. True to his word, he returned, first with offers of more money, and then with threats disguised as concern. He sent lawyers, agents, even tried to approach the rangers to sway them with promises of investment. But something in me had shifted. I listened, nodded politely, then sent them on their way. Knowing now that standing firm was possible because I was not alone, Rose's story had united people in a way I never could have imagined. The herd was not just mine to protect. It belonged to everyone who cared about wild places, about resilience, about the quiet miracles of survival. One gray afternoon, as the last of Blackwood's envoys left, Dr. Harrington joined me at the pasture fence. He watched Pip and Rose graze side by side, the colt occasionally glancing up to check that his mother was near. "You know," he said, his voice thoughtful, "most folks would have given up after a night like that, moved on, cut their losses, but not you, not Pip, not Rose. That's how real change happens, one stubborn fight at a time." I laughed, shaking my head, a warmth filling my chest that no storm could chill. "I think we just reminded each other how to keep going," I said. "When it matters, you don't quit." Rose grew stronger with each sunrise. The wound on her leg healed, her coat shone, and her spirit returned in small, everyday rebellions. Her pushy nudge at the gate, her insistent wicker for oats. Pip grew braver too, exploring farther each day, always coming back to check on his mother, always returning to me for a quick scratch behind the ears. But the story didn't end with their recovery. Instead, it opened up something new. A community committed to making sure what we'd nearly lost would never be so vulnerable again. I started working with local schools, inviting students to visit, to see the herd, to learn about the delicate balance between people and nature. The rangers began new patrols, cataloging every foal and mapping migration paths to keep the herd safe from future storms and, if I had anything to say about it, from greedy developers. One weekend, we hosted a gathering on the moor. Families came with picnics, kids took rides on our calmest mares, and Dr. Harrington led a nature walk, pointing out the rare plants and insects that made Exmoor unique. At the end of the day, as the sun dipped low and the last of the kids ran wild through the grass, I stood by Rose and Pip, looking out at a world changed by the smallest acts of courage. I realized the real legacy I'd inherited wasn't just the land or the bloodline or even the herd. It was the willingness to fight for something precious, even when the odds looked impossible. To stand in the storm, to trust that you could survive, and then to rebuild, not alone, but together. That night, I filmed a short message for everyone who had followed Rose and Pip's journey, posting it online with shaking hands but a steady heart. If this story moved you, I said, please help us protect Exmoor's wild ponies. Like, subscribe, and share this with anyone who believes in second chances. Tell us in the comments. What would you fight for, even if the world told you it couldn't be done? I closed my message with a promise. The future belongs to those who show up, who love fiercely, who never give up. Thank you for standing with us. Thank you for believing in hope. As I finished, I looked out at Rose and Pip sleeping side by side, the barn glowing with the soft light of lanterns and the hush of a new beginning. I knew there would be hard days ahead, storms and threats and challenges I couldn't yet name. But I wasn't afraid. The most important lessons come not from books or blood, but from the raw, wild places in ourselves that wake up when everything is on the line. That's what Rose and Pip taught me. That's what Exmoor gave me. A reminder that, in the end, love and perseverance always win. So as the moor fell quiet, I listened to the steady breath of the herd, the heart of my family and my home. I let the silence settle, the lesson take root. And when I closed my eyes, it was not the storm I remembered, but the light breaking through.